Might muff some of these, but the reason I'll muff some is because I'm going to try and get as many people as I can. So, like I say, on the good side, this is a great turnout of local, state, federal officials, and of course that's exactly the coordination we need as we work on flood recovery and also work to make sure we're prepared for next year. And that's the focus of today's effort between myself, Congressman Berg, Senator Conrad, Governor Dalrymple, your mayors, your county commissioners. I think everybody wants to make sure that we are doing everything we can to coordinate local, state, and federal efforts, that we're doing all we can to help our citizens recover as they work to recover, that we're working with the state and federal agencies to make sure that our dikes, levees, dams, and our system is as strong and as dependable as it can be, and that we're coordinating with Weather Service and everyone else, and certainly the Corps, to make sure that we are as prepared as possible for next year. So that's what today is about, and I see this as a process, and I think you do too. This is a process that we as elected officials have to continue throughout this fall and into next spring to work with our citizens, again, to help them in this recovery effort, to get things dried out and repaired and fixed up and make sure they're structurally sound, and that we're prepared for next year, and that we're communicating to them so that they know what's going on. There's uncertainty in this process, and the only way we can try to reduce that uncertainty as much as possible is to continue to meet on a regular basis. Again, all of us, local, state, and federal, and try to create the best teamwork possible, because it is certainly frustrating and trying for citizens as they're working to try to get to try to recover, to try to get answers, to figure out what they're going to do. There's so much that goes into it, and we know that that's true here in the Bismarck-Mandan area, Burley-Morton County area, and it's certainly true up in Minot. We'll be meeting up in Minot like this, and Devils Lake and around the state, the valley. But this is certainly a priority for us in North Dakota now. We have a lot of great things going on in North Dakota, a lot of great things. We get a lot of great national attention. But at the same time, this flooding's tough stuff. And so we have to keep working with our citizens and understanding how difficult it is for them as they work and seek to recover. So that's the purpose of the meeting. And again, I really appreciate all of you being here. This is to coordinate our efforts and update local officials and make sure we're working with the local officials to do everything we can, and providing as much information as possible to the public. So now I'm going to walk through and just outline who all is here, because again, I think it goes to the fact that we've got to make this a team effort and cover all the bases. I'm going to ask for comments from all of them, but in particular, I want the Corps and the FEMA to really lay out what they're doing in terms of recovery and helping with recovery. Again, making sure that we're undertaking both mitigation efforts and fixing up the levees and the dikes and the roads and all that, and then talk about preparation for next year. And I'm also, after I introduce everybody, I'm going to go through the front end some of the funding efforts that we've been working on in Congress to try to make sure that these agencies have the resources to help our citizens. So with that, Rick, Congressman Berg, thank you for being here. Appreciate it very much. Also, we have with us General John McMahon. He is the commander for the Northwest region of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and we appreciate very much General McMahon coming out and being here for this meeting. Also, Colonel Bob Ruck, who is the district commander out of Omaha for this district, and also with the Corps, Jody Farhat, who is Chief of Water Management. From the National Weather Service, we'll be hearing from Jeff Savadell, who's a meteorologist. He also has some people with him, and I'll ask him to introduce the other folks he has with him when he makes his comments. From FEMA, we will be hearing from Tim Geltson, I'm sorry. Yes, I already screwed it up. Sorry about that. Geltson, right? Yes, sir. Tim, or Tim, as I like to call him. He'll be talking about recovery mitigation efforts. We have a good crew here from FEMA. and hopefully they can talk both about what they're doing and answer some questions that you as councilmen and commissioners are getting to, and try to help with that process. From the state, we have, of course, General Sprincenatic with our Guard, and our Adjutant General, Todd Sando, with the State Water Commission. We also have Murray Sagsveen, and Murray is here. Murray is actually leading, there he is, the recovery coordination effort up in Minot. So thanks, Murray, for being here. Governor's Office, Andrea Travnik, and also, did you bring Rauschenberger with you? That's what it said, my list says, Andrea.
No, he wasn't able to make it.
Yeah, that's,
Sorry.
I thought I would have noticed if he was around here somewhere. Thank you for being here. Mandan Mayor Tim Helbling. Mayor, thanks for being here and for your good work in the community of Mandan. And Jim Neubauer, the city administrator. Mayor Warford is out of town and could not be here, but we are pleased to have Bill Welkin, the city administrator, and also Jeff Heinz, who's our emergency ops director. From Morton County, we have Bruce Strinden, and appreciate very much you being here, Bruce. Also, we have a number of commissioners. We have Doug Schonert, who is you're the vice chair for Burley, correct? And I see Mark Armstrong's here, another county commissioner. We have Marty Beckel with Kent Conrad's staff. We also have a number of legislators, and I appreciate that very much because they have a special session coming up. And again, this goes back to my point that I emphasize about coordination. The recovery effort involves the federal programs, it involves the local efforts, which all of you lead. It also involves the state piece, and that state and piece involves so many things, not just Guard and Division of Emergency Management, but obviously the legislature and the governor's office. And I know that they're looking at how they can best coordinate in our flood recovery and flood fight effort certainly for the Minot area and for the whole state, whether it's Devil's Lake, roads, or other issues. So I want to thank legislators for being here. Senator Ralph Kilzer, Senator Ron Carlisle, also Mike Nathy. I saw Mike in the back. Thank you for being here. Dick Dever, Jim Schmidt, and I think I got them all. Who did I miss? Sorry? Oh, Ralph, Senator Dr. Ralph Kilzer. How could I miss you? You're in the front row. Oh, I did get you. Okay, well then I got you twice. All right, if I could, right at the outset, I'd like to go through, I actually handed out a kind of a press release / informational statement, but let me just kind of go through where we're at the federal level. Right now, under the various federal programs, we anticipate that there'll be something over $900 million that comes into the state of North Dakota this year. The current estimate's about $927 million that will be coming into the state, or that it is coming in or will be coming in. I mean, a good share of that has already come in. I don't have it broken out specifically for this region. For the Minot region, it's something over $300 million already, but between what's come in and what will come in based on current damage estimates, it's like I say, right now something over $900 million, about $927 million. That figure will likely continue to go up. That consists of funding for roads, what we call emergency road funding assistance. That's about $304 million. PA, public assistance, that's where the federal government covers 90% of the cost to repair any federal or any public structures, that are damaged or destroyed. So that's things like schools or public buildings or other types of public infrastructure that's damaged. That's a 90% share. That's $270 million, our current estimate. The state, remember, the legislature enacted a measure last session that covers another 7% of that, which is very important. So the local share is 3% for the city or for the county, 3%. Right now, that damage or that estimate on the federal end is about $270 million. The Corps to date spends something over $37 million in here in their efforts. FEMA has provided individual assistance of about $92.5 million. Those are grants to individuals, and that's where you can get a grant up to the $30,200. So they've paid out $92.5 million in grants so far. That deadline has been extended, so people, if they have damages, can still apply. That's important. The governor's office was really on top of things there and asked for that extension. Good job to those guys. And so if there is somebody that still needs to get their application in, they can do so. And then the SBA disaster loans, to this point, about $223 million, and those are the low-interest disaster loans. So that's the funding that's currently coming in under various programs. Now, the federal government right now is operating under what's called a CR, continuing resolution, which was passed. The House passed a version, the Senate's passed a version. When the House goes back in next week, I think they'll reconcile the two. The way it works is that continuing resolution funds the budget. Included in there is another $2.65 billion for FEMA, to keep FEMA going and so that they have funding. That CR, though, only runs for a couple months. It runs till about the middle of November. So what we're working on actually is the full year budget. And I'm on the Appropriations Committee, so we've been working in the Appropriations Committee to provide additional disaster assistance, because we're going to need much more than that $2.65 billion for FEMA, and not just in FEMA, but in these other categories as well, core, roads, and other areas. So what we've already put in, what we've already approved through the Appropriations Committee process, and there's 12 bills that go into the budget, but we've approved a number of them already, but we've already passed additional funding through the Appropriation Committee process. FEMA, $6 billion. Now, the $2.65 billion is part of that $6 billion. Okay, so we increased it about another $3.5 billion. So it's $6 billion for FEMA. Emergency roads, we added another $2 billion, because that's a big issue, not just here in this state, but around the country. Army Corps of Engineers. The Army Corps of Engineers, they'll probably tell you, but last number they gave us, and this changes all the time, but they said they're going to need $2 billion to fix the damage along the Missouri River and so forth, and that may go into the Mississippi too, but they usually have about $1 billion. We added another billion, so there's $2 billion. That's $2 billion for the Corps to repair damages. So that's like I say, $1 billion on top of their normal $1 billion. And then we're working in another area, CDBG, Community Development Block Grant dollars. And that's particularly where we can bring dollars, and actually they come to the state can provide them to a community, and the community can provide them to help with housing, to repair housing. And I sponsored an amendment there with Roy Blunt, and we've got $400 million in community development block grant funding in the appropriations bill, which was passed and approved. Now, in talking to other senators, I believe that number's got to come up, and they're saying as we get additional updated estimates from Hurricane Irene and the fires in Texas and some of these other things, that we should be able to work to get more in that category. And I will say, and Rick can respond to this too, I believe that people on both sides of the aisle, both Republicans and Democrats, have agreed we need more disaster funding based on what's going on this year around the country, and that there is bipartisan agreement on that. And so we'll continue to be working on that when we go back. We're trying to find offsets in other areas, prioritizing so that we can pay for these things, because as you know, we have a budget deficit, so it's important that we find ways to pay for these things, and we're working to do that. And we've been supporting offsets. For example, I supported $6.9 billion in disaster funding assistance, but also then voted for $7 billion to offset the cost, because we got to get on top of our federal deficit at the same time. But we must provide this disaster funding assistance, and I believe that people recognize that on a bipartisan basis. One other thing that I think, at least that I'm working on the congressional end, is there's one other pot of money that I didn't mention, but it's on the sheets here if you get the handout. And we've got this handout for you if you want it. But we also get what's called hazard mitigation grant dollars. And that goes to buy out homes along the river where, you're trying to build your flood protection. Now, the local community or the county makes the decision in tandem with the state as to what's going to get bought out or not. And, you know, Spry and these guys can talk to you about that process. And I know they're working on it with the cities and the counties. But the hazard mitigation grant dollars, it's about another 15% of what comes in here. And there's going to be $1 billion coming in here. So there's, I think, going to be, you know, 100 million plus that's going to come in these hazard mitigation grant dollars to buy out homes. And one problem we have there is when we buy out those homes right now, you can't build a dike or levee there. And we got to be able to do that. I mean, we have to get, and they see it, ask any, well, Rick can talk about it, from the River Valley, we build these things and take them down every year. Now the Corps does and that's St. Paul Corps, not you guys, it's the other region. They do a great job. Every year they come in, and you've seen it, they take all this dirt out north of town there, they build these huge dikes, and then after the flood they take them back down, and guess what? The next year they do the same thing. So every year we pay the money, local, state, and federal, to build the dike and take it down. And that's because the current law says that's the way you have to do it. You can't leave the dike there because the federal government paid to buy the homes out where you build it. So I've got a bill in to change it, and we're trying to push that through. I'm hopeful that we can get it through in a timely way, but as you know, the old saying, it takes an act of Congress, is literally true. But that would help us in terms of the floodway not having to use as much ground, so we may be able to do it more cost effectively. But on the buyout piece, I know there's questions, but again, that'll be a state and local decision. That's what we're working on. We've got a good start on some of this stuff. It's going to take more work and to get there, but in terms of the dollars for these agencies, like I say, there are dollars in there now for FEMA, and we'll do everything we can to keep pushing it. I mean, we're working on it every day. Rick, your turn.
Well, I would just like to, again, thank Senator Hoeven for pulling this together, and he gave a great recap. I do think that the next 30 to 60 days, there's a lot of bipartisan effort in the House. We recognize this is a key role of government, and so we need to make it, you know, we need to deliver that. Again, how we offset the funding, those are some of the battles that we're going to go through. But the other thing I'd like to say, we've had a lot of discussions about this, is we want to try and bring as many dollars to the state level where we can have flexibility, because we know that here at the state level and the county level and the city level, you guys can make better choices than we can in DC. So our goal is to have this money come with as few strings attached as possible to enable you to accomplish those highest priorities. And then just finally, I'd like to say the number one thing we need to know long term is where we're going to be at next spring. And so, hopefully that this will start that dialogue. I mean, who knows what this level of communications would have meant 12 months ago? I don't know. But we need to have this high level of communication, so as people are rebuilding and making these difficult decisions in their homes, they have as much information as they possibly can to understand the risk, not only this coming spring, but long term in the future. So I look forward to this, and I look forward to that understanding as an outcome.
Thanks, Rick. General McMahon, let's go to you. And again, thank you for being here. Talk both about your efforts to help work through the recovery this year, make sure all our defenses are structurally sound, preparations into the winter, and then we're really going to want to get into your plan for the next spring. And after that, we'll go around, but I want to make sure we leave time for these public officials to really bring forward their thoughts and questions, because they're hearing from folks here on the ground every day. So, General McMahon.
Thank you, Senator Hoeven, Congressman Berg. It's great to be with you here in Bismarck and to meet with you all. Good morning. So the senator pointed to recovery and being ready for next year as the two focus points of this meeting. And sir, I couldn't agree with you more in terms of the need to cooperate, collaborate, and coordinate at all levels of government. I think you're exactly right, and I think that that's certainly the focus of the Corps is to play its role in this team of teams that it's going to take to do both these things: recover long term and be ready for the runoff season that begins 1 March 2012 in the near term. So we are what I would call getting ourselves organized as the water has come down and we begin to understand the extent of the damages in terms of what it's done on the inside of the dams, what it's done to levees, what it's done to homes, farms, and businesses along the river and in the floodplain. We're beginning to get a much better picture, and our efforts at the Corps are focused on inspections and assessments in 4 specific veins. The first vein is to look at the water management from a technical perspective and review the decisions and the data and the communications, all aspects of how the system was managed this past year, so that we can learn and institutionalize that learning long term and make recommendations as to what we might do differently in the long term. And that effort is undergoing. It's being led by a group of 4 highly respected hydrologists and scientists, one from academia, one from the National Weather Service, one from the USGS, and one from the NRCS. And so we've asked an independent external group to look inside the Corps and give us their insights into how we could do better under the circumstances this year and what we might do long-term to change, if anything. And that has longer-term implications, not so much near-term implications. The second thrust of our assessment is to inspect the dams and the levees and the navigation structures in the river and get an assessment for the extent of the damage and the cost estimate. Senator Hoeven mentioned a $2 billion figure. That's sort of what I call a running estimate. I think our number on the Missouri is $1 billion and counting, but again, that is a very preliminary figure, and I wouldn't want to be held to it. I think the good news is that both sides of the Congress are collaborating and working to get the funding appropriated to that end, and I think that is very positive news, Senator, and I welcome it. The third thrust of our effort is to conduct an after-action review of the flood fighting. And again, this is an effort at the local district level and at the regional level to assess how we did and what we could do better, what we can learn from the efforts of putting in temporary levees, as an example, the timeliness of the communication, all aspects of the flood fight that is still ongoing but beginning to subside, quite frankly, as the water comes down. And then the fourth component is a basin-wide impact, other areas, cultural resources of significance to the tribes, as an example, the economic impacts, and that has many dimensions to it, and so forth. So we get a much better sense for the extent of the damage, both damage that was that occurred and damage that was avoided, and so that effort will unfold in the ensuing months as well. The other thing that's going on in the sense of getting organized is we're setting up what we're calling the Missouri River Flood Task Force, which is a group of federal, state, and tribal leaders who will come together to streamline decision-making and affect or leverage the authorities and the appropriations of each of the various agencies, whether it's state or federal level, so that we can make wise investments as we think about both near-term repairs and long-term restoration. And so our first meeting is scheduled for the 21st of October. We're in the process of chartering the organization. I've reached out to my FEMA regional administrators, Beth Freeman and Robin Finnegan, as well as NRCS, Tom Christensen, as well as the Department of Agriculture Farm Service Agency reps, and we have a call tomorrow with them, as a matter of fact, to, again, this is a multi-pronged, multi-dimensional, interagency, multi-governmental effort to make sure that, as Senator Hoeven alluded to, that we are all working together to make quick decisions, smart decisions, wise investments, as the appropriations come forward and decisions are made as far as what to repair, when to repair, how to repair, and so on and so forth. So that effort is unfolding as we speak as well. Ultimately, I think what's going to need to happen is we need to realize what I'll call a shared vision for the future of the basin and the floodplain. And that's work that I think the governors and other leaders in the basin are beginning to undertake. There's a meeting, a follow-on meeting, a second meeting with the governors on there was one on the 7th or the 19th of August, and there's one coming up on the 17th of October. And they are, as is Senator Hoeven, Congressman Berg, and others, very interested in how we're doing this very same thing, working together, collaborating, cooperating, coordinating to affect both the near-term and long-term progress that we need to make. So with respect to getting ready for next year, so we laid out a plan. We called it a drawdown strategy about a month and a half, 2 months ago. And God willing, it's basically unfolded as we laid it out. And we anticipate that about on the 3rd of October, we'll be down to 40,000 cubic feet per second releases out of Gavin's Point. That will allow, generally speaking, the water in the floodplain to drain off the fields and out of the homes. And I know that that's happening here in Bismarck and Mandan because you're further upstream in the system. But as the water comes down, we're in a position to, as I said, do all the inspections and assessments and move out. We're anticipating bringing the water down to 20,000 cubic feet per second in early December, which will allow the construction efforts that need to occur to begin as well. And so we've looked at very closely, and we continue to look at, and I'll defer to our NOAA National Weather Service expert on the panel here, but we're looking very closely and continuing to monitor through the Climatological Prediction Center of NOAA what the forecast both for the remainder of 2011 is and into 2012. And I won't steal your thunder, sir, but basically there is a general prediction that we're going to have I guess a cooler year next year, and precipitation in the equal chances of normal, above normal, below normal levels. So yeah. So what does that mean? Well, that's why I'm going to defer to the expert. But but I think if the prediction was we're going to have record snowpack and lots of a very wet season, et cetera, then I think I would be very concerned about a repeat of next year, or this year, next year. I'm less concerned about that. I think what happened this year was a record in terms of the hydrologic record going back to 1898. I'm not anticipating that it will happen next year in accordance with the predictions and the forecasts that we're seeing. That's not to say it couldn't happen, and I'm not here to make any guarantees because I'm not a weather expert, and nor do any of us control the weather. But I think when you look at the forecast and then you look at the probability of this event this year occurring next year, it's a very low probability. Those two facts combined give me as the senator said, there's still a lot of uncertainty out there, but it gives me a degree of confidence that under this uncertain picture that we won't have another year next year like we did this year. And so we're planning to bring the water down such that we have the 16.3 million acre feet of storage space available next year. That, in some people's mind, that's not a satisfactory answer. But as the person who's ultimately got to decide how much water to evacuate, there's got to be a real good reason to evacuate more water. And either it's got to be in terms of probabilities or it's got to be in terms of the weather forecast. But there's other trade-offs associated with evacuating more water that are very real. And they begin with the time available, the limited time available we have to conduct the repairs that we need to repair. And so the more water we evacuate, the later we start making repairs. And so that's a big consideration. We don't have a lot of time between now and the 1st of March 2012 to make the repairs. So there's all that combination of factors that bear on this problem that lead me to continue to believe that evacuating down to 16.3 million acre feet of storage space for next year is still the prudent course of action under the circumstances. We remain very vigilant in watching the weather. We are very willing to increase releases, and the annual operating plan that that has been drafted and put out in the public, and that we will conduct public meetings about in the last week of October and the first week of November. We will take public comments on the draft plan and discuss all the considerations that you and others have regarding that plan. But right now, all the indications are that 16.3 million acre feet of storage space for flood control next year will be adequate, and we will be willing, as is indicated in the draft plan, to increase releases if indicators, whether it's plains, snow, mountain snow, or a change in the rain predictions or forecasts to increase our releases earlier, understanding the consequences associated with that, ice jamming, the confluence of snow melt and increased releases causing local flooding. There are consequences to all those kinds of decisions that we will make in a prudent manner as we go through the runoff season that begins 1 March 2012. And with that, Senator, I think I'll stop and invite questions or as this unfolds, sir.
Let's go on. Tell us one other thing, though, and that's a Sakakawea Lake level going into the winter of what?
Jody, can you help?
That would be going into the spring, 1837.5.
1837. And so, I mean, one of the questions that we're going to want to ask you right up front is your ability to move more water if you're at that level and we get a lot of snow/precipitation. That's a very important question that you really are going to have to convey to people, and so that they understand how you're going to make sure that if you're at that level going into the spring and we have a lot of snow or rain, how you're going to get it through the system without having the kind of flood we had this year. And you can take that now, or we can, if you need to think about it. But I mean, that's going to be a key point here.
Yes, sir. So I think, and again, I don't mean to be repetitive, but I think, as I said, we are willing and understanding the consequences of increasing releases beyond what would be normal levels in the event of increased forecast rain accumulation, either in the plains, snow melts, or increased forecasts with respect to precipitation in the form of rain. We are willing to increase releases, understanding the consequences in terms of local flooding down through the system. I think that's something that we're building into the annual operating plan. We'll hear public comment as the plan gels between now and the middle of December when it becomes finalized. But I think we're all signed up to doing that and understanding the consequences of it.
Well, I think that's what you're really going to have to show. As you come out in October, last week, October, first week, November, you really are going to have to show folks how you can move that water out and how that works and what the impacts are coming into spring with that level. I think it's going to be very important.
Yes, sir. Jody, do you want to add anything to that?
I'll just say that, we do have constrictions in the river during the winter, during periods of ice formation, which limits our ability to make dramatic increases in releases from Garrison Dam. We can do it once we get a stable ice cover. We can slowly step up the releases, watch the stages very closely. So we'll continue to monitor the situation.
And it's a combination of the protection we have in place going into the winter, coming out into the spring.
Yes.
And then if you have to bring those releases up because of precipitation so that there's protection. I think that people really, you're going to really have to communicate and show people how that works.
Yep.
So they understand and have a comfort level. Colonel, did you have something on that you wanted?
I guess all I would say is that, right now, I look at the river system from Rulo all the way up to here, and I know we're really focused on it, but I think it's important to recognize that, as we only, we're drawing to the normal 16.3 million acre feet, we still have water on levees in some pretty critical areas. And so, it's a responsible drawdown plan. The ability to move some more water is very important, and I know we have to show that, but I'll also say that we couldn't have moved the amount of water that we would for this amount of rain. So we will have to explain that in great detail, and we'll get there for you.
And the defenses that are maintained and put in place have to correlate with
Yes,
that.
sir.
Right. Rick?
Just, what was our anticipation of the spring flood in the past when we had 16.3? Was it 49 million acre feet, or what was our normal flow?
Storm design.
Correct.
So,
I didn't
go ahead.
follow
Well, I
that.
think
What
that-
was the normal anticipated flood in the spring? Was it 49 million acre feet, or?
Our average runoff is about 25 million acre feet.
Right, but the modeling where you have the 16.3 in there, you had a peak
Oh,
on
that was based on the 1881 flood with 40 million acre feet over a 5-month period from March to July.
40
million acre feet in 5 months. This year, we had about 49 during that same period.
Okay, my understanding was that this whole flood event was going to be 61?
Yes, the annual runoff is 61.
Okay, so when you're talking about 40 million over a 5-month period, what would be the annual runoff in that base year of 18?
I don't know what the annual runoff in that. We can get that number for you.
Well, again, my only point is, I think we got to have the same numbers so people can get a handle on this.
Mhm.
And my understanding was that the 1881, the flow was 49 million, and that might have been over a whole year, not that 5-month period.
That is probably right.
And so, and what I'm hearing is that it's, for this year, anticipating through December, they're expecting 61 million as a total year. And so you're saying that was 49 over this 5-month period. I guess my whole point is, again, from just a simple common sense standpoint, if our old plan talks about 49 million as the peak, and we had 16.3 in storage, and we know we got 61 million this last year, we need to know that doing the same thing with the same amount of storage capacity is not going to create the same result. And so, anyway,
No, Congressman, it's a great point, and I appreciate the sentiment and the concerns that are backing up your expression of this concern. And, and I don't want to sound like a bureaucrat here, but, we have to, just 4 years ago, we were coming out of a drought that lasted almost 8 years. There are extremes on either end of the hydrologic record. And we have to be thinking responsibly about both ends. This year, we had an extremely wet year. It's a record year, going back to 1898. 4 years ago, we were coming out of 8 years of drought. So, and we got to the lowest point in the system, in that 8-year period. So, if we overreact on the basis of an extreme year that occurred this year, in a way that we draw down too much water and then we enter into a series of drought years, we're going to have serious regrets about that. And so we have to be responsible in terms of, managing the extent we can the extremes, but anticipating on the basis of the forecast and the hydrologic record what will happen in any given year. And so that's the delicate dance that we're trying to do here as responsible citizens. We could react in a way that we manage to the extremes, but the consequences of that are probably unacceptable. And I would say they are acceptable, but it's the people we serve that ultimately judge the acceptability of how we manage the system. But I just think it's part of our responsibility is to take the extremes into account, but manage. And one of the things that I think it's important to realize is this event was moderated. It was regulated by virtue of the main stem dams. Had not the dams been there, you would have had pulses of flooding through Bismarck, Mandan over the course of this spring and summer, where flows would have been 100,000 cubic feet per second more than what you saw. And I mean, that would have devastated, that would have killed people, that would have just done so much damage and potentially killed people. So we're blessed in the sense that, we didn't have that happen because we were able to manage this extreme event, albeit with a lot of pain and suffering and flooding and damage and interruption of people's lives and livelihoods, which I recognize right off the bat, and it's regretful, but it could have been a lot worse.
And I just want to take a step back. I want to thank you for being here. I don't want to be in a defensive thing, and really probably my only point is I want to make sure that we're measuring the right things and that we boil this down to real simple things so people here in North Dakota, up and down the Missouri River, know what we're talking about. And so at the end of the day, again, we're doing the right thing, the thing that common sense would have us do, but I think everyone needs to know, what that process is.
I would just say two things. First off, if you're talking about creating more space in the system in the future, what we lost during those drought years every year was an average of 4 million acre feet in the system. So if you take 8 million acre feet out of the system to create more flood control space, you're essentially 2 years into that drought. So you'll get to that point 2 years quicker. And that's all balancing. We have to figure out that's the right thing. For this year, the responsible thing in getting the water off the levees and getting the damage repaired, we are where we are. When this panel comes back and says, maybe you do need more space, maybe you need to look at this, or maybe you look at that, I don't think we're stuck on this number for the long term. That is for this year, so we can get in and responsibly repair the damage that's there, and perhaps this, these people will tell us we need more space, and then we'll go there.
But the point that we're making is that you've got to demonstrate that you have the ability to manage to get the water through, if we have a lot of water next year like we had this year, and control it. That it's a combination of the defenses that you have in place and the fact that you move more water out earlier, which it looks like you weren't doing because of concerns downstream, that you're able to do that next year if you need to, so that we don't have the kind of flooding that we had this year. That's what you have to show people when you come back in October and November and provide that information. That's the information we want to see. So these folks out there are going, okay, we understand it, we can see how that can work, and we feel reasonably comfortable that we're going to be okay.
Very, very happy to do that. Now, a little bit different in the way we're going to come in and do the AOP. Before we came in and did about an hour and a half presentation, and then we left. We want to come in, spend the whole afternoon here with people coming in and talking to us about it,
Good.
and then do the public meeting portion in the afternoon. But we really do want to answer those questions that sometimes don't get answered in these forums. We really want to take that time.
Good. Well, that's what we'll prepare for. Yeah. Spry, and one of the things that General McMahon came to D.C., and we had, I think, at least 7 or 8 of our senators there that are working on this, and we said, do you have the flexibility to make these adjustments? And you told us you do.
I do.
Okay, good. General Spry.
All right, thank you, Senator, and good morning, everyone. Congressman, good morning. Just a couple of short notes. First off, I'm here this morning as the Adjutant General, also as the Director of Emergency Services for the state. And I would mention, too, when General Sogsveen was introduced, he is actually the State Flood Recovery Officer for all of North Dakota. So he has been spending some time here in the Bismarck, Mandan, Burley, Morton County areas, elsewhere in the state, too, although most of his time has been in Minot. So General Sogsveen Murray is available and has, will continue to work in this area as well as elsewhere in the state. It's interesting, as we meet here this morning, we have an after-action review meeting going on at Emergency Services that involves all of the state and federal agencies that were involved in the flood response earlier this year. And last week we had one with just the state agencies. This week we've included the federal agencies, and the outcome of it is obviously to look back and see how we can improve in the future if we have an event anywhere near what we experienced this year again. So that meeting has taken place, and I can assure everyone that the outcome from it will be an even better response action in the event of a similar event. I would just mention that, we're in the process of recovery. A big part of that is conducting the inspections of the various public works projects across, throughout the area. And our estimate right now is there may be as many as 40,000 individual projects, whether it's a, county road, a city street, sewer system, school, building, or whatever. And those 40,000 plus projects are in the 44 counties that were declared disasters, both at the state and federal level this year. We anticipate having all of the project worksheets done shortly after the first of the year. We've got a record number of people from the state and FEMA out there working with the political subdivisions. And what we've learned thus far is the basis for the estimate of slightly more than $500 million of public infrastructure involvement or recovery and repair, and also the individual assistance that's being provided. And it's that number, it's most of that number that results in the hazard mitigation funding that we'll be receiving in the state. We expect that to be coming into North Dakota probably in about another 3 or 4 months. We need to wrap up most all of the project worksheets first. And as you said, Senator, it's the state's intent, the governor's intent that the vast majority of that money, if not all, will be used for buyouts, throughout the state, with most of it probably going to the Minot area simply because the amount of devastation. When we look at all of the damages in the state and the requirements for state cost share, the number right now is that we're estimating about a $38 million state cost share to match the federal money, of which most of it's at 90%. And then, of course, the balance is picked up by local counties, cities, and townships. So we are prepared from the state's perspective to be able to make that match with the authorities that we have available to us. And then, as we look to next year and beyond, I can assure you that both, well, from the Guard's perspective, we'll be ready to do whatever is asked of us. From the state agency's perspective, especially emergency services, we'll be prepared to do whatever is necessary to support whatever disaster response there is at the local level. So unless there are any questions, that's briefly where we're at today and where we're going in terms of the bigger picture.
No, and obviously the key piece is coordinating both the federal dollars, the work of the federal agencies, and then what the state does, both your agency, Division of Emergency Management, Murray, and whatever legislators the governor decide in the special session, making that all come together, both in terms of the plan for flood protection, what's going to get bought out, and those kind of things, because we know people are trying to get those answers. So whatever we can do to keep that process moving, we know
And we will.
you're doing everything you can
We
there,
will.
and the road repairs as well.
Yeah,
We have a
huge.
short construction season in this part of the country, so that we got to keep pushing on it.
Well, and what made things worse this year was just the lateness of the flood. I mean, normally we experience flooding in North Dakota in the March, April timeframe, early May. So we have a good 6-7 months until freeze up. This year, with the flooding that occurred on the Missouri River and the Souris River, we were still well above flood stage in August. So we lost, if you will, a couple of months of construction season, and that's why we do have to expedite the recovery and repair process.
Todd, I think both you and from the Jeff with the National Weather Service talk a little bit about, what the general was talking about, we were talking about here just a minute ago, their efforts to get the river level down to make repairs and that kind of stuff, but then also the protections we need along the river relative to the lake elevation next spring, and their ability to move water next spring, so we don't have a repeat of this year. And any thoughts that you two have on that side? Because again, I think this is helpful in terms of knowing that when these guys come back, end of the month, actually be, I guess, end of October, they got a plan that A, people understand, and B, gives people a comfort level. They're going to be okay.
Want me to cover the outlook first, or?
You want to cover weather first, or?
I can do the
However you
weather.
guys think it works
Okay.
best.
Real quick, my name's Jeff Sabat. I'm the meteorologist in charge with the NOAA National Weather Service here in Bismarck. And General McMahon already mentioned a little bit about the winter outlook, and never fails to get a chuckle when you hear the equal chances part mentioned. But I think first I'll kind of recap what the outlook is, and then go in a little bit more detail what we are expecting to kind of build on that. The basically looking for below normal temperatures, so colder than normal winter across much of the north, including Montana, North Dakota, much of the Missouri Basin, the northern parts. Precipitation-wise, we're looking for wetter than normal winter stretching from the Pacific Northwest into, right now, the official outlook is brings that area into extreme western North Dakota, where then it shows the equal chances across a good portion of the state. Now, one thing that's very similar to last year and is the driver for the pattern we're seeing in that outlook is the La Nina, which is strengthening across the Pacific. And basically that's where we have below normal sea surface temperatures across the equatorial Pacific, and that in turn affects jet streams, storm tracks, and things like that. So that's similar to what we had last year. There's a couple other things going on, and we've done some local research in our office here. Not getting deeply into it, but another Pacific decadal oscillation, which can enhance or kind of work against that.
What was that term?
Pacific decadal oscillation. It's a, but what the research shows is that, yeah, every time something happens, we'll attribute an oscillation to it.
You're not making up words, are you?
No, that one's for real. But what it shows is that the phase that is in, combined with the La Nina, is often results in wetter than normal winters for us, like we've had the last couple of years. So my point is that even though it's shown that equal chances across the entire state, we are talking to our Climate Prediction Center and trying to see if they can take a closer look at that themselves. They tend to be pretty conservative with the outlooks. So, I mean, what we're saying locally here is to expect normal to above normal precipitation for the winter. The one other thing I wanted to mention too, and a little bit of an urban myth that's been going around, is a 200-inch snowfall forecast. And I can assure you, we didn't make that forecast, and we're kind of at a loss for where that came from. Our record in Bismarck is just a little bit over 100 inches. Our normal is about 55. So while I don't want to say anything's impossible when it comes to the weather, we're pretty confident that 200 inches might not happen. So that's not our forecast. We have no idea where it came from. Just, I think somebody came up with a number and it just took off. But there will be a new outlook coming out in about a month on October 20th. And
Well, that's good timing too, if these guys are going to be back.
But my main point is, even though it's showing equal chances over much of the state, I wouldn't be surprised to see that above normal area moving farther eastward, especially with the La Nina continuing.
200 wasn't Fargo, was it?
No, I think that. So that's all I had, unless there are any questions.
Todd, then kind of give your perspective on this.
Okay, perspective-wise, as you know, we dealt with a 4-month flood, so that's unprecedented to deal with a flood this long for extended period. So, I mean, they've done a good job getting the water down. Sakakawea is at 42.7, so they've evacuated 12 feet of water out of Lake Sakakawea. So we're in pretty good position that wise, so that the Corps will be able to get the rest of the water out and get down to 37.5 quite easily with normal flows this winter.
If we're at 37 in the spring, what do you think has to happen for us to be sure then that we can get all the water through without flooding damage like we had this year if we get that kind of precip? Because it's going to be a combination of mitigation on the river and their ability to move more water sooner, right? So just give us a few things that you think have to be there. These guys can be thinking about them so that when they come back, we know that they got it covered.
Well, we got a real difficulty here in Bismarck, Mandan, and with winter time, you got to move the water before winter. So really, we have till about December 1st to get water out of the upper basin, because we start having ice jams, ice problems, ice formation, loss of channel capacity. We could have flooding in December and January and February with flows in the 30,000 range.
Are there things we could do? You remember in '09 we blew up some of those ice jams. Are there things the guards should lay in as prep for anything we could do on ice jam or anything that would help?
You know, the big issue is sedimentation and that, and sandbars in the delta. That, you know, as we enter Lake Oahe, we got a lot of sediment downstream. So, I mean, we really need dredging capabilities, everything else. I mean, we don't even have, maybe
So dredging is something the Corps' got to get into their long-term plan, or
I think
we
we-
got to have dredging through this stretch for the part of the long-term plan, right?
Right. Especially with all the erosion that took place this year and all the amount of sediment that was placed at the headwaters of Lake Oahe, we have lots of issues with sedimentation. We did gain a lot of capacity right through Bismarck. The channel bottom eroded down 6 feet. But once you get past Bismarck and past the bridges and the bank stabilization and get around the corner below the Hart River and get down towards Mary College, there's a lot more sediment down there, so that's, a real issue. So sediment's an issue. Right now, the flows are down to 26,000. That's still above normal. This forecast we're hearing is not a good forecast. I mean, to handle this flood event of this year, the reservoirs would have to go lower. We'd have to have much higher spring releases. The Corps would have to let more water out in March and April and May. I don't know how they could do it in the middle of winter because they really pushed it hard last winter. We had high stages all winter long, and we had high groundwater this past winter already, and they pushed it up towards 30,000. So if you want to move water, you got to do it in the next 60 days right now. If you want to take more water out of the system, it has to take place now. Otherwise, it really has to wait till next springtime and see how it comes off, and then March, April, May, get some more water out then. And because this past year there wasn't a lot of water moved initially, during the flood event. I mean, there'd be an opportunity then, I would think, after evaluating it.
From that March 20 to, say, May 20 period. Move more water.
And right now, we're actually, the scouring that took place and the degradation of the channel, the river is at 6.7 at this 26,000 flow. And we're actually can pass more water right now. Like the stage is 1.3 feet lower at this stage than last year. So it did scour a lot out through here. So we got an ability to carry more water through Bismarck Madden right now.
So this is something they should be looking at right now.
Right. So, if there's that, big of a pressure and it's forecast, if it's that realistic, maybe we want to try to get more water through right now before December 1st and create more storage.
We'd like you to take a look at that and let us know. I think it's important. Yes, sir.
Okay, a few of the other things, just, that we've got the water back down and seeing some of the impacts. There's a lot of things that we were worried about. Our bank stabilization, the Corps did put in a lot of bank protection, and I think it really held up quite well. We kept the channel from migrating. We really did. We just had isolated places where we had these big scour holes and eddies and had, impacts to some homes, but all in all, the bank stabilization kept the river in check, and I think we got to make sure we get these repaired because there is a lot of damage to them. They held up, but there's we got to get an inventory of that, and there's $1 million of damage there, and they've said it's the O&M's responsibility of the state and the local water boards, and that's a big task. But I think bank stabilization, because that's our protection below the dam. We don't have levees. We just have temporary levees this year for the first time. Our protection has been the dams, Garrison Dam, and our other protection is bank stabilization. And bank stabilization did quite well in many places. It saved a lot of people.
Is that driven by the local water boards or city, county, Corps? Who drives that process?
That whole process, everyone points a different direction. So, really, we got to get the locals and the water boards involved. The Corps passed it off to the state of North Dakota. The state of North Dakota passed it off to the water boards. The water boards try to pass it back to the state. So we got to work something out. We need.
Murray, is that something that you could help coordinate in your, or maybe you're already doing it on the bank stabilization?
Yeah.
I'll work with Todd and General Sprinzanatic with DES to try to resolve this. I've worked with many water resource districts, and I'm very familiar with that process.
So it's not just the Corps doing it. This is something where we need locals to.
Yes.
Help, yeah, because these projects were mainly built 40, 50 years ago in the 60s and 70s, and they're massive rock revetments, rock jetties. They're major projects that were put in place to help move water from Garrison to Lake Oahe, so they really did protect a lot of people. It prevented the river from breaking out and heading a different direction, and especially outside bends of the river, it was, it was really aggressive. The river really wanted to break out in places, and they really kept the river in check. So I think, that's something we really got to look at closely.
Okay.
And sedimentation, we got lots of issues. Our marinas, a
Well-
lot of them are blocked off. I mean, not only did we block them, but there's huge sandbars in front of them. I think intakes is another big issue with our municipalities, our power plants, our irrigators. There is huge sandbars on inside bends and other locations. There's a lot of aggradation that took place and just tremendous amounts of sediment in places that it's going to take a lot to get it open back up and get intakes open and get marinas open. I was up in Misty Waters, and I couldn't believe it. They didn't have a sandbar in front of the marina. It went right into the marina. So it went right through the bridge, scoured out the bridge, and placed a sandbar, bigger than this room inside the marina. So the river's really different. There's lots of big areas of erosion, big areas of deposition that needs to be fixed. So,
That's going to be driven by the local entities and based on what they want done and what they're willing to do.
and then a couple other things we've really noticed too. Well, boat ramps, there's going to be millions of dollars Game and Fish is going to have to put back into boat ramps because they're silted in or scoured out, eroded out. Another big issue really is trees too. The trees cottonwood really are in trouble, a lot of them, because they've been inundated for months on end. We had, the last couple of days, I was able to be down in Rapid City with the general and the colonel, and we had a forester from Nebraska come in. He talked about the tens of thousands of acres of forest in the riparian area that's been flooded, and they're very concerned about the cottonwoods. As you notice, the leaves came off a month early here. They're in trouble, and the ones that have been in water are in real trouble. So we're going to have so many trees that we're going to have to deal with too, and that could be, could impact infrastructure too and create bigger problems with degradation, delta formation. We could have trees, have problems that are intakes and that type of thing. So it's going to be interesting how our trees recover next year. But right now, there's a lot of them in trouble. So
Okay.
a lot of interesting
That
things.
may be a good time to go to FEMA and local officials as we're talking about those issues, right?
Yep.
So, I guess, Tim, at this point, get into these are the kind of things we're working on in recovery. So, Murray, if you had something, or Tim, let's get into that and what's going on and what needs to be done.
Senator, in response to your question, yesterday, representatives of the Burley, Morton, and Bismarck and Mandan met to talk about a joint effort involving also 3 water resource districts and there was general consensus to proceed under a joint powers type of agreement. And I met with Governor Dalrymple yesterday, and he endorsed this kind of a concept. We had, at the time, we were focusing on flood mitigation for flows such as we experienced this year, and also focused on ice jam backup. But what we could do is expand the scope of that if all of the parties agree to address the issues that Todd mentioned, so that we could address all of those at the same time. And I think that would be a very helpful way to get things done on a very comprehensive manner and quickly.
That would be good.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Murray. Okay, Tim, FEMA.
Well, thank you, Senator, Congressman. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Generally, FEMA enjoys a very strong relationship with the state of North Dakota, and we support the state and local efforts to recover. We've been here many times over the past few years, unfortunately, which isn't to say that I haven't enjoyed the relationships that I've developed up here, but would that it were another way. I don't know that we have necessarily challenges moving forward in the Bismarck-Mandan area. There's a lot of work to be done. Our public assistance program, individual assistance program, and hazard mitigation programs, the 3 largest grant programs that FEMA does run, operate well. Certainly the budget reconciliation process in Washington helps and will provide some certainty for funding in the future. There are individuals here who are much better educated than I on those specific programs, and I would defer any questions, specific kinds of questions to them.
Let's do it this way. I think, Todd brought up a whole range of things that we're dealing with, and there's others in this recovery process, but let's go to the local officials, have them kind of touch base, bring up the questions, the issues, and make sure we're getting after things that people need help with, and the things that we aren't getting to, that we figure out how we're going to get there. So, Bill, let's go to you, and let's go to the commissioners. And I missed a couple commissioners earlier, too. We got Jerry Woodcox here and also Mark Armstrong. So thanks for joining us, guys. Bill, go ahead.
Well, Senator and Congressman, thank you for the opportunity to have this session today. We of course, are very appreciative of the past flood experience that response efforts that you helped us with, and we're very appreciative of today's opportunity as we move toward planning assistance. Bismarck's priority, of course, is to continue with our recovery and at the same time to participate in a planning activity for the future. We want to participate in the region-wide planning activity with the multiple jurisdictions that Major General Sagsveen just referenced. We think that that's an appropriate way to take a look at what happened, to take a look at what the river is going to look like, because we all recognize there's a brand new river out there and we need to understand and be able to interact with that, and to take a look at the forecast for both the weather and the river and to determine what kind of impacts it'll have on the community. So we appreciate that opportunity, and we thank you in advance, all the folks, for all the assistance you will be giving us as we move that planning effort forward. But that is where we need to be, and there's an awful lot of answers that we'll be looking for.
Describe that planning effort a little bit, Murray. That's going to start when, and kind of how's it going to work?
Senator, the discussion that we had yesterday with the city and county officials would be, if everybody adopts it, would be a joint exercise of powers agreement involving the two cities, Bismarck and Mandan, the two counties, Morton and Burley, and the three water resource districts, Lower Hart, Burley, and Morton. And that would be 7 parties, and I discussed it briefly yesterday with Governor Dalrymple as the chair of the State Water Commission to appoint a chair of that group, so there'd be eight parties involved. And the concept that we talked is to use the powers of the Joint Powers Agreement, which is a very broad, flexible arrangement, and possibly funded by mitigation funds, and we've discussed that with the mitigation people in Department of Emergency Services, which would require an application. But the concept would be a joint 2-county, 2-city, 3-water resource district planning effort to identify structural and non-structural alternatives for flood mitigation, both to address the high flows that we experienced this summer and also for the ice jams experienced in 2009. Now, with the other issue that Todd mentioned, that it could be expanded to increase that. But the beauty of this is that all appropriate jurisdictions are sitting around the table with the planning and working together to accomplish this on both sides of the river. And I think we could move along very quickly. Talked with the Attorney General's office this morning about refining the Joint Powers Agreement, and I think we could, as soon as I would plan to personally meet with the 2 county commissions, 2 city commissions, and the water resource boards for signatures and approval. And I think we could move along very quickly and have most of that planning done this winter.
So then, to get at things though, like that Todd brought up, like trees and sandbars and, what homes are going to be bought out and those kind of things. I mean, is that the process you envision to getting those answers? Or how do you get to those?
Todd threw a few more things on the table that I hadn't been thinking about. But yes, I think in a joint effort, we could address those easily, more easily than individually working on things.
Okay.
And I'm committed to working on that effort to move it forward.
Okay. Well, and then I want to make sure that the commissioners get in on this too. Mayor Helbling, and you jump in here. I mean, this is kind of I mean, I'm sure those are some of the answers your folks are looking for, and so the fastest way to get at it is what we're after.
Senator, I'd just like to add on to this point. You know, where federal authorities, whether they're permitting or capabilities like dredging or whatever, might play into supporting the state and local efforts, you know, that's exactly the kind of thing that we want to bring into this Missouri River Flood Task Force to work. So that I mean, it's just you know, Todd gave a great litany of a whole bunch of issues that, you know, from a state, local perspective that, you know, may involve a permitting or consultation with Fish and Wildlife or something like that at the federal level, or it may involve an authority involving NRCS. So those are the kinds of things where participation in the Missouri River Flood Task Force would be beneficial to the state to enable and streamline and get permits or whatever will support your local efforts.
Well, I think that's very important, because when you're talking about the releases issues, which we've got more work to do on, the dredging issues, longer-term bank stabilization, trees, all of that, you know, we need to get answers and figure this out for our citizens, but then it has to be tied into what you're doing system-wide. So I agree, we're going to have to coordinate that with you. Tim, do you want to go next, and then we'll get to commissioners here, but just jump in with, you know, any of these issues we're working on that people, you know, that we're trying to get people answers on.
Okay, thank you, Senator and Congressman. We appreciate you taking the time out again to hold a meeting like this. I think it's very important. In Mandan, we're very concerned with all the uncertainty, and especially what's going to happen in the spring. We're going to leave our plugs in place in all of the bays. We're leaving all the primary protection up along the Missouri River, unless it was sandbags or something that was going to deteriorate. So we're going to leave all that in place. We're going to probably need some help from the senator and the congressman when it comes to an extension to remove those. We have until May 10th. I think we're allowed one extension through FEMA to remove our primary diking systems, and then we have until May 10th.
But right there, extension. Okay, so right now, when are you supposed to have them out?
I think the state has already applied for the first extension. We're allowed one extension of 6 months, and that'll take us to approximately May 10th, I believe. And we're supposed to have these systems removed by May 10th. And then after that, from what I've been told by the FEMA folks, it's much more difficult to get an extension to remove them and have FEMA participate in the funding. So that's something I think we're going to have to look seriously at, is how do we get that extension? What do we have to do to get that extension?
Guys?
And so, you know, Beth Freeman, the FEMA administrator, and I have had a discussion about this very scenario where in specific instances it might make sense, and again, it's keyed on, well, what are the releases going to be in the spring that might require the extension, another extension beyond May. I think that's a great example, and she certainly indicated a willingness to consider those and act prudently in support of local communities when it's appropriate, but not sort of a blanket, you know, one size fits all, but apply good common sense to good requests based on the rest of the system and what it looks like in terms of releases and whatnot. So I think that's the kind of thing that we exactly need to collaborate on and make smart decisions, so we're not, as you said earlier,
So you're
take it out,
telling me-
put it in, take it out.
So you're telling me that we have the extension to May 10, and if we need it longer, we'll get it?
I'm telling you that Beth Freeman has.
It's his question.
Yes, sir. I've talked to Beth about doing that. I'm not guaranteeing that. Yeah.
But we need that kind of guarantee. These guys need to know that if they leave the protections in place, which we are going to do, which we must do, which is, you know, there's two sides of the coin. You making sure you got the levels down enough so that you can get water out in an orderly way so we don't flood again, and we keeping enough defenses up so we have a higher level of protection. So we need to know that they can keep the defenses up. So you've got to be able to give us that answer. We need that answer. I mean, we need to know we can keep up. I think that's what the mayor's saying.
Right, and we're going to keep them up whether they pay for it or not.
He just needs a
but
straight answer that, yeah,
they
you can
should
do
pay
it.
for it because it's a common sense thing to do.
And
Yeah.
maybe what we need to know, though, General, is just that by mid-April, you'll make that decision.
Sir,
Because
I'm going to
it-
defer to my FEMA counterpart here,
Right.
because this is
Go
a
ahead.
FEMA call. I'm just telling you that we've talked about it at the administrator level, and it's something that's on the radar
Sure.
screen.
My only point is, I think if we could have a target date that this decision is going to be made a month out from that May 10th, or when that decision will be made, that gives us a month to react to it.
Yeah. We just need to know that if they need to keep right now they have till May 10th, and they need to know if they need to keep them up, they can keep them up, and then take them down when it makes sense to take them down, and you'll crush her. I think that's all he's saying.
You maybe want 2 mics?
Only need one. I bet the only thing I can guarantee is that I'll ask the question and get an answer.
Good. Well, you get us an answer. I gotta believe, I mean, we understand process in general, but our folks need answers so they can take care of the citizens.
And what we would pledge to do is to give the good engineering advice to FEMA that they need to leave that up. I mean, you know, we should be able to help aid in that decision.
Okay.
And I'd like to expand on that a little bit. FEMA has been very good to work with. Tim and Roger, I mean, they've been very fair to us to this point. We've got a few issues, but I think everybody does. They've been good to work with. I think they told us this may need somebody higher up than them to make that decision, so that's why I brought it up. Another area that Mr. Sando alluded to is in front of the plugs. We're getting some huge sandbars, so we're going to have to look at how we can get rid of that material, where we can deposit that material. Does it really make sense to truck it miles away from this site, or can we leave it somewhere there? I have a couple of questions, I guess, for General McMahon, if I may, Senator.
Absolutely.
With what's transpired over the year and all of the uncertainty, especially when it comes to the heart and the ice jams, wouldn't it make sense to pulse the river to some extent before freeze-up to try to see where that channel is going to go and what's going to happen south of the Heart River? You know, I would think and I don't know all the ins and outs, but to me that would seem to make sense to do some pulsing of the river and see where that channel is going to go, and maybe we can take some proactive steps now to try to
You bet.
do something for
So I think
spring.
we were, Jody, talking about this very situation last night at dinner. You want to expound on it, or maybe we can bring Todd into this discussion?
Yeah, you know, we have worked closely with the state during this drawdown schedule. We adjusted the level where we held releases steady on their request, and we also have made recent adjustment in the last week or two to allow them to get some photography. We generally, we're going to, well, our plan is to run 26,000 through this fall. We generally cut releases in December during the period of the freeze-up because the stage rises very dramatically during the ice formation period, and then increase releases gradually. You know, if the state would like us to go back up on releases for a little bit to see where the channel is going to go, I don't know that it will tell us anything that we haven't seen the last few weeks, but, you know, we're willing to entertain that request.
And there was probably some merit to try, do some fine tuning of things instead of just staying at 26,000. Maybe we should try to look at some consequences of different releases right now and how the river will react to it.
Well, so we're going to see about more releases, and we're going to see about pulsing, right?
Yes, sir. Certainly
Okay.
look at it. You bet.
Okay, and then before all of the flooding started, or when it all started, you know, we read in the papers and saw in the media all the talk of building sandbars for the environmentalists to help the birds and stuff. As a mayor, I need to be reassured that you are making the call, sir, based on people, and the environmentalists aren't making the call based on birds.
I can guarantee I'm making the decisions on the basis of what the impact of people are. No doubt about it.
Good.
I think that'll reassure everybody. And then you had stated earlier, you talked about repairs that needed to be made to the system. And could you expand on that? Because I don't think there's a lot of repairs that need to be made in Bismarck-Mandan, but I think people have to be aware of the effects that it has downstream, and you have other issues besides what's going on here.
So in general terms, there are at least 17 places where levees either breached or overtopped downstream of Gavin's Point. And really, the levees begin right about Omaha and then run south. So there's significant erosion, there's holes in the levees, there's overtopping and erosive forces there that have, we're just beginning to understand it as the water begins to come down off the levees and flow out of the floodplains, because water's been on both sides. There's navigation structures, dikes, what we call dikes in the Nav channel that have been underwater for months. that need to be inspected and possibly repaired, those kinds of things. I suppose that we will find intakes and, bridges and roads and, power plants, lots of erosion on the banks that impact those kinds of public infrastructure, not to mention private property, all of which need to be assessed and ultimately repaired or restored in some way. But we're just beginning to understand the full scale and scope of all those kinds of impacts. Bob, you want to add to that?
Yeah, and I think it's a great question, and trying to have that system awareness is important. And we just came off the levees in Council Bluffs and Omaha. The water is just inching off the toe. Just south of Omaha, we're still on some of those levees. There's down towards Hamburg where we had a breach of a levee, and it was flowing 45,000 CFS through those fields up towards that city, and we still have flow going through those breaches. And that's the real question, Senator, when you talk about releasing more water now. There's great impacts downstream. So it is a giant balancing impact, and we will look at that. But if we want to get in there and make any repairs and make sure those people are protected as well for next year, it is a fine balancing act.
But again, that is why I emphasize the importance of these defenses. So again, part of the reasons of giving people here a comfort level, it's a combination of both. So if you can't get that water level down more, then we have to see how you can get more water through in the spring, and that we have adequate defense so the people aren't flooded. Hence, when the mayor says, well, we need to know we can keep this defense up and that defense up, we need you to intervene with those guys if they give the answers, so they say, oh yeah, we're going to make sure that that defense is adequate. It's all got to tie together.
It's an equation. You just explained
Right.
that, and I've got it.
And that's what we want to know now, this fall, because by next spring, there isn't time to do it. So that's why we're going through this, and we've got to nail down those answers. Go ahead, Mayor.
And one other question I had, and this is probably for FEMA, and I probably should have brought it up before, but when we remove this material, we have to remove it from the site. We can't place it. We can't fill low-lying areas, things that would make common sense. I don't know what it's classified as, tainted material or whatever. Most of this stuff has never touched water. So why couldn't you use some of this material to fill in some of the low-lying areas and spread it out and save probably millions of dollars of trucking it back to a pit and burying it when it could be used right on the spot, save everybody a lot of money, and do everybody some good?
That's probably a FEMA thing, huh? Or is that you guys? Who answers that
No, I
one?
think it's a FEMA question. Not to pass the buck.
Tim, if you want to just say, yeah, that's fine, that's okay.
Okay.
Good, okay.
No, I'm not sure about the exact answer to that question. If it's material brought in from some other place, though, and placed in the floodplain, I know that FEMA it's problematic because you're adding more
Excuse me, Tim?
material.
If you would like me to field that, I'd be happy to.
Roger, I'd love you to do that.
Great.
Thank you.
Specific to that question, FEMA will not have made a decision that that material is particularly tainted. It very well might not be. That would be a decision that we would defer to the state health authorities. And then if it is, you would need to take whatever action is appropriate under those conditions. In terms of how you might be allowed to reuse that material, we do need to keep in mind that that you will not be able to take that material and place it in what is either a floodway or or a 100-year floodplain. It will have to be moved out. It will have to be moved outside of that once you do take it out. Now, it is entirely possible for you to take that and stage it in such a way that it can be reused in some manner, as long as that staging area is not within the 100-year floodplain. And if I could, I can also address the previous question related to the time extensions. The state, under the authorities that we have given them, have already issued a blanket time extension for all applicants within the state of North Dakota, within which to complete all emergency work until May 9th of 2012. So you do have that. We do still have the issue of an extension past that point, which FEMA would have to take action on. I simply cannot stand here today and guarantee you that we would make one decision or another prior to looking at the factors that might exist at that time. I do absolutely agree, however, with General McManus, with Beth Freeman of FEMA Region 7. And I know that if our Region 8 administrator here, Robin Finnegan, were with us today, she would say the same thing. We will absolutely look at the facts and the ground truth that we have next spring and how things are shaping up to be, and we will work with you and the Corps to make what we think is the most responsible and prudent decision regarding those.
And I'd just like to state again that, you know, the working relationship between FEMA and the city of Mandan has been good. These guys have done a phenomenal job.
Yeah. What I read out of there is you can't just spread the fill,
Yep.
but they are going to work with you on the extension if you need it.
And they are. And in just closing, I'd like to thank everybody at the table here, and especially the citizens of Mandan. I can't even count on one hand the complaints that we've had in the city of Mandan. The people have been phenomenal, and I applaud them for what they've done, and I applaud all of you
Right
for what
on.
you've done.
Our
Thank you.
citizens have been tremendous. Thanks, Mayor. Commissioners, we're going to kind of wrap up with whatever you guys have.
Well, thank you, and I want to thank everyone for coming here. Is it on now?
Yep.
I want to thank everyone for coming, and I just want to pick up on a couple things that Mayor Helbling said. This dike material that we've been using and then having to remove it, we've got a couple places where that could have been well used and just leveled out, and it's already raised the road. All we had to do is just widen it a little bit and left in place. And with the major problems that we have in our national economy, trying to find funding for all of this, and having to remove it, and now we will probably turn around and haul it back in at some point and raise the roads. Who's in charge of making these decisions for FEMA? I mean, is it a bureau where they make all the decisions, or do you as senators and representatives, do you have some way to work with these people and make some good common sense rules and regulations so that we have something to fall back on and not just have someone from FEMA saying, well, no, that's not possible, this is the way it is, and this is what we have to do? I'd like to ask you this question. Can there be something done as senators and representatives to help us in that?
For us, we either have to pass a law, or we have to go to them and try to get them to make a decision that makes common sense. That's how it works from our standpoint. But if you're talking about roads, this is something going back to my days as governor, and Spry, you jump in here. My understanding is on roads, you know, that's what a lot of this funding is for, is to rebuild the road, you know, to its former condition, and that you should be able to find a way to utilize some of that work you've already done to accomplish that. I mean, we did that all the time.
Yep, that's correct.
I'll just give you one example. Our rural water system out here north of Bismarck, the road into it from 1804, approximately a little better than a quarter of a mile, we had to raise that to a certain level so that we could have access to that water plant if necessary. And then we also went on beyond that and diked around some of our wells and area, and it worked well. But now right today, as I speak, we're in the process of removing that. It would have made common sense to leave that in place. And
The dike you're talking about?
no, the road from 1804 to a water plant. We had to raise
Or
it.
was it there? Oh, you just raised it?
We raised it by probably 3 feet or 4 feet so that we would have access to that water plant at all costs, you know. And now FEMA says you have to remove this, and we are removing it. But it doesn't make common sense. There's no common sense there at all. And I understand they've got the rules and regulations, but who
Let's go back through the
Yeah,
State
follow up.
Department of Emergency Services and Department of Emergency Management and see if we can't get them, if there isn't some way to keep it. Now, remember a minute at the beginning, I said I've got legislation in that I call the FEMA Common Sense Act, and it is to, in anywhere where you've got, of course, that's where they've put in hazard mitigation ground. That wouldn't be anywhere in the floodplain. You're saying anywhere in the floodplain, they're making you remove this stuff, huh?
Well,
See, I thought with the road improvements, I'm surprised.
I'll have to go back and check to see what, I'm not aware of the situation, but see what can be done. I agree, common sense would
we
say
also
it
had
should
a-
stay.
But Doug, we have two ways. We either convince them to do it, just like you're doing, or we have to try to pass a law to get them to do it.
well, I'd rather not have to pass a law. I don't think we need more laws in this country, but somebody needs to convince somebody, and I think you as senators and representatives, maybe nationwide, we're talking about one little segment here, but nationwide, they need to sit down and review and revise some of these rules and regulations to make it simpler and easier and
absolutely.
quicker and cheaper.
Absolutely.
I just think that it gets so involved and people get so put off with this because when we keep talking about our national economy being in the shape we're in, the national funding, we don't have any money to do this and that, and then we have to waste money by putting this in, remove it, and now we want to go back in and rebuild this road. And we got another issue on South 48th Avenue down here, kind of the same thing. We hauled all this dirt in there, raised it up, made a dike, now we removed it all, when we would like to probably go back in there and raise that road. Now, does that make any sense?
No, not the road, go further south.
No, we've got a plan for that too, but I just want to,
I think what we need to do is work through the Department of Emergency Services and
okay.
talk to FEMA and see if we can get some help on these.
Well, a lot of these dikes are roads
But
have already
but I don't know if
been
you're talking about a
removed.
dike or a road. Now, you gotta, there's a difference between diking and roads,
It
but
was a dike built on the road, and then in the case of the water plant, it was to build up the road so we had access to the water plant. So,
what do you think, Spry, where they're building up a road so they can get access? Seems to me we've been able to do that.
I thought we had in the past. I'm very certain we have. I guess we just need to find out more about the situation and why they're telling you what they are. I see some of the FEMA folks are kind of shrugging their shoulders too, so
I
we'll follow up with it, Doug.
I appreciate any help in that area, and I just want to say that we talked with our water resource district, and we were just in the process of getting with the city and to come up with some kind of a plan for the future here. And I want to thank General Sagsveen for spearheading this effort and getting the 2 counties, 2 cities, and the 3 water resource districts. I think that's the way to go. We really need to get planning in the future here as to what we're going to do. So.
Well, I think the planning is right on, like Murray's talking about. We'll see if we can't work with you on those roads to get access to your
Thank you.
Power plant. Bruce?
Thank you again to those of you in the congressional delegation for not only what you're doing today, but for everything you have done on an ongoing basis. I could sit here all morning and thank people. Tim alluded to the fact that our citizens are really the heroes. They have persevered and will continue to persevere as we recover from the flooding, and I can't tell you how much I admire each and every one of them. They have been absolutely fantastic. Nice thing about being last is that almost everything has been said. I know that everybody's hungry. I would like to just make one comment regarding flood insurance and FEMA. By the way, FEMA has been wonderful to work with on our side of the river too. Obviously, there are people who would like to have more assistance. But those who had flood insurance basically got nothing from FEMA. And in addition, what I have found in talking to the citizens is that the flood insurance, although it is a federal program, many different companies offer flood insurance. And what I have found in talking to many of our residents, there's quite a wide disparity between what's covered by one company and what is covered by another. And I'm wondering if some type of standardization within that flood insurance program might not be useful. And I don't know whether it's a company that's to blame that is not being cooperative, or if it's variances within the program. But if I have heard complaints, really, they have been more on the side of flood insurance, and it might be something that would be worth looking into.
Well, one suggestion there would, if somebody's having trouble with their flood insurance, they should be talking to the State Insurance Commissioner, Adam Ham. And that's what his, no?
No, they sent you to, excuse me, I'm sorry, they sent
Yep.
you to a FEMA representative.
Oh.
Dean Kimball is the one that I ended up speaking with last.
Senator, one of the things that we've been doing, we're working with the Insurance Department and Insurance Commissioner right now. A week after next, they're going to have a insurance agent forum here in Bismarck, and we're going to have one of the FEMA officials there to address all the issues and questions, because we've heard the same thing, that different agents are telling different stories or giving different explanations as to what the program is. The federal flood insurance program is a nationwide program, and there should be uniformity amongst all the agents because it's set down in law. So hopefully the agents will be at that forum that the insurance commissioner is going to sponsor, and they'll have all their questions answered so everybody knows the same facts about the insurance program.
Well, I think that's good, and it's good FEMA's here and that you'll have somebody involved working with that. But I think when it comes down to consistency with the agents, it is going to take our insurance commissioner as well, because he has jurisdiction over those insurance agents to make sure that they're complying and working with FEMA and the standardization you're talking about. So it's probably going to take both, but it sounds like they've got a plan to address it, so that's good.
I'd just like to throw in one other point, too. One of the problems in this last year was when you buy your flood insurance and when it goes into effect, and when the effective start of the flood is. And we passed legislation out of the House that basically says 30 days. And so you're not having to second guess someone determining the start of the flood. So again, I think just we need some certainty in some of these things, and you'll see that over in the Senate.
Okay.
One other quick thing, Senator Hoeven, and this is for Noah, regarding La Nina. She's a fickle mistress, and I would suggest that you guys consider severing the relationship. We don't need any more of her. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. Certainly want to thank all of you for being here today. Colonel, did you have something else?
I just wanted to give an update, because many years, and when you were the governor, Jamestown was a critical focal point for us, and just let you know that, although the reservoir levels there shot up greatly through the summer with all the rain that was coming into that area, that although we are still at a major flood stage up there, that things are dropping nicely now, and we should have it down early to mid-November, down to the proper levels for the winter.
Good.
And I know that's been a concern to a lot of
Good,
people.
yeah, and appreciate your emergency work over there. Thanks to all of you. Ron, I think the only other thing we're going to touch on was roads, and we'll follow up. There's no reason that the federal dollars shouldn't be coming into the state DOT, and I can touch base, but I think we got the rest of the, did you have any other items on your list that we didn't touch?
For the record, Steve Senator, Ron Carlisle, District 30. I didn't know if you were going to allow any time for any comments, or how's your time frame? I guess that's.
Well, we're kind of wrapping up, but if you had something, I thought we touched most of what you had on your list, but if you have something we missed, go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to comment on the press release that said that your funding for FEMA, does that include the National Flood Insurance, is only through November at this point to continuing resolution? Is that my understanding?
Through November 18.
Okay, and then you'll be working on that to get something
Right.
sure and.
Right, which is important because, like I say, I pointed out other funding that needs to come into the equation. So that extension, the current extension is through November 18.
Okay, and then the federal highway bill, my understanding is just through March at this point. That'll affect the state in some ways. Is that correct? Oh, okay, so we've got a couple nebulous items right now that need to be shored.
We've got another 2-hour discussion on this.
Oh, okay.
No.
The other thing, Senator, I heard the general talk about forming yet another commission. You put together a multi-state river watch. Does the general know that, I mean, you put a...
Right, we've already met, that's what I say, we've already met with the general and talked both about funding, and which is why I went through the funding up front, and B, making sure that they have the flexibility to do these things we talked about today.
So Senator, the
What
general
he's
is well aware
talking
of your
about is, what he's talking
commission.
about is something different. Remember the governor said they wanted more input on management of the river?
Okay,
What he's saying is he's putting together a group to get that input.
Okay, one other comment, Mr. Sando, a lot of us listen to because he lays the facts out as he sees them. Mr. Helbin, you took my thing about the fish and wildlife, right? I was going to comment, the general, you used your term fish and wildlife, NRCS. I used to be in the tree business, but I hope you put the fish and wildlife down the priority list. You said yourself, people first. We really like to hear that, okay? And then we'd asked some of my neighbors here, we're all South Burley, and I heard, Commissioner, you made a comment about 48th. We all live south of 48th, and I heard you said you had a plan. Some of us certainly want to hear about that because we all, you know.
We're working on it.
Okay. I had one more question, Senator, and then I'm out of here. Commissioner Schonert, what's going to happen with our tax base? Now, we had somebody come out to all of us that were flooded. Your property taxes are going to go down. I have yet to hear an answer from anybody. Who's picking up the difference to fund the roads and the police and fire and the sheriff and everything? Has any decision been made on the county end? Because someplace the difference is going to get picked up. If our assessment all goes down, which it probably will, are my neighbors to the north that didn't get flooded, are they going to pay the difference, or what's going to happen?
The difference will be in the assessment countywide. We've just approved the budget for 2012.
Okay.
And we're sitting quite well. We had to use a lot of emergency funding, but we are sitting quite well. No, you're not going to be increased, whether you're to the north or to the south of the dike. As you know, our tax assessors all come out and inspected your homes, and they are going to allow you a 60% decrease on the value of your loss for taxation purposes for the year 2011. Is that correct?
Well, I'm not sure. I haven't
Yeah.
heard the final thing, but they've been out there.
That's for the year 2011. If the homes are brought up and repaired by the 15th of February of 2012, they'll be reassessed then. If not, and if you still have a problem, we can assess them at that time, and your taxes will be based on the value then.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Senator, for allowing a couple questions.
Absolutely. And again, thanks to all of you for being here. More work to do. I want to echo the sentiments of mayors and the commissioners. Our citizens have done a good job, done a lot of hard work, and appreciate all of you being here. Know that we got more to do to help them as they work through this and we get prepared for next year. Thanks so much.